The message arrived on Tuesday afternoon as I was reviewing court documents in my office. The office was silent, the pages rustling beneath my fingers. Then my phone vibrated. 3 quick, sharp taps, like a tiny hammer striking my solar plexus. I recognized them immediately. The family vibration, Sister Claire's vibration. I opened it, and a cold, lifeless line of text pierced my eyes. Don't come to the rehearsal dinner on Friday. Jason's father is a federal judge. We can't allow you to embarrass us in front of his family. This is important. Please, just stay away. I read it. My brain refused to process the letters, but my body had already reacted. My stomach tightened, as if I'd been hit. I read it again, slowly, savoring every humiliation. Embarrass us. Stay away. I set the phone down on the polished oak of the desk. It rang loudly. I glanced at the appeal, but the words blurred into a blur. I picked up my pen, gripped it so tightly my bones turned white, and tried to return to the paragraph on circumstantial evidence. There was a soft knock. Marcus, my secretary, entered. Judge Rivera, oral arguments for the Henderson case are at 2. Do you need anything before we go into the courtroom? I looked up at him, forcing my facial muscles into a semblance of a neutral mask. No, Marcus. Thank you. I'm fine. He didn't leave, but paused in the doorway, his kind, intelligent face contorted with worry. Are you sure? You look... He hesitated, searching for the right word. Just family matters, I breathed, my voice sounding strangely distant, as if it were coming from another room. Nothing important. He nodded in disbelief, but left, quietly closing the door. And I sat there, thinking it was the absolute truth. Over 38 years, I'd calculated with mathematical precision the value of my family's opinion of me. 0. Absolutely 0. I was a mistake. A living, breathing typo in my parents' flawless life plan. Claire was the coveted first edition. They sang her lullabies, bought her pink skates, and sent her to piano lessons. I got her worn-out shoes and the quiet in the corner. Claire got SAT prep classes with a private tutor. I got a library card and the phrase, "You're independent here," as if independence were a gift, not the stigma of a survivor. Claire had a paid college education and dorm parties. I had 3 jobs, a community college, dark circles under my eyes, and a scholarship for a sharp mind, which was considered inconvenient in this family. When I entered law school, my father merely chuckled. And how are you going to pay it off? Loans? Irresponsible. Claire, however, having graduated with a marketing degree and found a job as a saleswoman in a boutique, was the hero of family dinners. And when, at 35, I, Elena Rivera, was appointed a federal judge, my mother said, "How sweet. Claire just got promoted to assistant manager. We're taking her out to dinner to celebrate." Of course, I wasn't invited. People think that the judicial robe falls from the sky onto those from wealthy families. No one sees 6 years in stuffy courtrooms defending those who have already been convicted. They don't see the sleepless nights poring over briefs, the internships with the formidable Judge Harrison, who saw in me not a hard life, but a keen legal mind. "You should apply," she said. "You're exactly what the system needs." I applied, and got it. Judge Rivera. And my family saw only potential shame. And now Claire, who was marrying the son of a federal judge, decided I was a blot on a perfect picture. Her message hung in the air, poisoning it. I took a screenshot, saved it in the same cloud folder where I'd been accumulating such evidence for years, a collection of small betrayals. Then I typed back, "Understood." The reply came instantly, relieved, lighthearted. "Thank you for understanding. See you at the wedding." I put the phone down. I picked up the heavy court file. The intercom rang. Marcus, reminding me it was time to go to the courtroom. I stood and adjusted my robe on my shoulders. The fabric was thick, weighty, a reminder of duty, of who I really am. Not Sister Claire, not the daughter who was always at the wrong time, but a judge. I took a deep breath and left the office, leaving my sister's hysterical phone rant where it belonged, in the silence of the locked screen. Waiting for me in the courtroom were the people whose fates lay in my hands, and that was truly important. Judge Patricia Harrison had been my guiding light for 12 long years. After I stopped being her secretary, we stayed in touch, monthly lunches, rare but meaningful calls. She became for me what my own mother never became, a support system, a beacon, living proof that I belonged. That Wednesday, we met in our quiet bistro. "You look like you're solving a world problem instead of eating a salad," Patricia said without preamble, carefully cutting the salmon. "Family emergency. My sister's getting married," I sighed, setting down my fork. I'd mentioned it briefly months ago, but Patricia, with her keen memory for detail, remembered everything. "The groom is Jason Montgomery." And then her fork paused in midair. The metal glinted in the chandelier light. "Robert's son," she stated, not asked. Her voice became focused, sharp. "Do you know Judge Harrison?" I asked anyway, though the answer was obvious. Their world of federal judges was small. Robert and I started in the Ninth Circuit at the same time. Brilliant minds. Honest, which is rare. She put down her fork, fixing me with a piercing gaze. "Does your family even know what you do for a living?" "They do. They don't care." "What about Jason? Do you know him?" "I haven't been given the honor. Claire is trying to keep me out of her new life." My voice sounded flat, as if I was reading someone else's testimony. And then Patricia's expression transformed. A mixture of astonishment, wild amusement, and cold fury flashed in her eyes. "Wait, so Robert has no idea that his future daughter-in-law is your sister?" "Apparently not." "And your sister rescinded the invitation to the rehearsal dinner out of fear that you would embarrass them in front of a federal judge?" Patricia laughed, loudly, boomingly, heartily, causing the couple at the next table to look over. "What?" I was taken aback. "Elena, my dear, this dinner. Robert's hosting it at Rosewood Manor." "I know." Claire breathes it. "I was invited 3 months ago. Robert and I have been friends for a quarter of a century," she said, taking out her phone with a businesslike air. "And I'm bringing a guest. You." "Patricia, no. This is too much. I don't want to make a scene." "This isn't a scene. This is justice." Her smile was razor sharp. "They've ignored you your whole life. It's time to shine a light on the situation. As my guest, the rest will be left to chance." Friday arrived, bright and indifferent. The morning dissolved into the drudgery of court, the morning session, motions, arguments over evidence. I dispensed justice with my usual precision, signing orders with a firm hand. At 3 o'clock, I left the building, leaving my robe in the office. Patricia insisted on arriving together. "We need a dramatic entrance," she said. I put on my dark blue dress, strict, silk, and flawless. I wore pearl earrings, her gift for my appointment. At 6:15, a black car with a driver pulled up to the entrance. "Perfect," Patricia assessed as I sat down next to her. "Ready?" "Ready to see my sister's face," I replied, and a long-forgotten feeling, anticipation, froze in my chest. Robert loves a good story, and he hates arrogance. This will be spectacular. Rosewood Manor greeted us with pompous luxury. Stone walls, uniformed doormen, the gleam of polished marble. Patricia took my arm. "Let's go," she said, her voice ringing with the air of a battle. The banquet hall was dazzling. Crystal, brocade, ceiling-high windows. And amidst this splendor, they, my family. My parents at the head table, frozen in the poses of dignitaries. Claire in a gossamer white dress, her laughter, too loud, too forced, cutting the air. Jason, stately and well-groomed. And he, Judge Robert Harrison, gray-haired with piercing eyes, a living legend of the judicial system. We froze in the doorway. Claire saw me first. Her face, beaming a second before, went through the stages. Incomprehension, shock, pure, primal terror. She jumped to her feet, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. "You? What are you doing here?" A tense silence fell over the room. "She's my guest," Patricia's voice rang out, even and weighty, filling the space. Robert Harrison turned around. A welcoming smile lit his face. "Patricia, finally!" And then his gaze fell on me. The smile froze, giving way to a moment of confusion, and then to pure, unadulterated amazement. Judge Rivera? The silence became absolute, thick as pitch. Judge Harrison, I nodded, feeling every muscle in my body tense to the limit. It's very nice to see you. He closed the distance between us in a few long strides. Elena, damn it, but Patricia said she'd bring a colleague. I didn't expect, he faltered, looking around at the family frozen in stupor. His gaze darted from Jason to Claire, then back to me. His lawyer's brain, extracting facts and making connections, was working in full view of everyone. Wait, you're a relative? Claire is my sister, I said clearly, enunciating each word. His expression reflected a complete collapse of his worldview. Your sister is getting married to my son. It looks like it, I confirmed quietly. Claire made a strange, strangled sound. Jason stood up. Dad, do you know her? No. Robert gave a short, puzzled laugh. Jason, Judge Rivera started out as my clerk in the Ninth Circuit. She's one of the most brilliant legal minds I've ever encountered. He turned back to me, his eyes genuinely confused. I swear, I didn't know you were related to that family. We don't advertise our relationship, I stated dryly, and Patricia gave my elbow an approving squeeze. At that moment, Claire's fork slipped from her fingers and landed on the china with a deafening clink. The sound echoed throughout the courtroom. You, a judge, she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, choked. A real federal judge. District Court, I corrected. Central District of California. How long? 3 years. You never said. Her tone was not a question, but an accusation. I did, I replied, my voice finally acquiring that same judicial, inflexible firmness. On the day of my appointment, my father asked if I was making a good salary now. My mother asked if I could handle the responsibility, and you asked me for help with a speeding ticket. Robert Harrison's face darkened. The amusement and surprise evaporated, giving way to cold, righteous anger. Excuse me, what? His question, quiet and clear, was addressed to everyone and no one. My mother, turning pale, stirred. Elena, please, not now. This is not the time or place. On the contrary, Virginia, Patricia's voice cut through the attempt to hush up the scandal like a knife through butter. It came from the podium, authoritative and undeniable. I believe this is precisely the time and place. Your daughter has worn the federal robe for 3 years. She dispenses justice, presiding over the most complex trials. She is the pride of our system. And you don't consider this worthy of family pride? My father's voice rang out sharply, trying to break the tense silence. Wait a minute. But his attempt was immediately cut off. Robert Harrison didn't even raise his voice. He simply turned his head slowly toward him, his entire demeanor conveying the same unwavering authority that had silenced crowded courtrooms for years. Sit down, Frank, please, he said, and his politeness held more power than any shout. I want to hear the whole story. And Jason? Jason looked at me as if I were an alien materialized from another dimension. His gaze swept over my face, taking in every feature, as if seeing me for the first time. Are you that Judge Rivera? The one who ruled in the Rodriguez case? Yes, I confirmed. The ruling excluding evidence under the Fourth Amendment. I cited it last month to win a motion. A burst of professional admiration entered his voice, then was instantly replaced by complete confusion. He turned sharply to Claire. You told me your sister works in, what? A call center? Customer service? Claire's face betrayed her. First it turned porcelain white, then a deep, unhealthy flush. I said she works with people, she blurted out, her voice ringing with panicked deception. No, Claire, Jason shook his head. His voice was quiet, but every letter was cast in steel. You said specifically, customer service. You said she got nowhere. I remember that conversation clearly. The silence that followed his words was so thick, so resonant, so fragile, that it seemed one false move and everything around would shatter. Robert Harrison slowly pushed back his chair. His movements were stately, full of his own authority. "Elena, Patricia, please sit down. I think it's time for a serious, albeit belated, conversation." We sat. The entire room, all those elegant guests, froze in a silent performance. Jason was still standing, as if roots had grown through the parquet floor. "How long have you known my father?" he asked, and his question hung in the air, directed at me. 15 years. I clerked for Judge Harrison straight out of law school. Then I worked as a public defender for 6 years before being appointed to the bench." "A public defender?" Robert nodded, a warm professional pride gleaming in his eyes. "One of the best. I've read your briefs. You have a rare gift to see not just the case, but the person behind it, to empathize without losing your legal rigor." My mother, Virginia, made another attempt to slip out from under the sword of Damocles' truth. "Elena she never shared any details with us." "Because you never asked," Patricia's voice thundered in that sterile room. She could contain herself no longer. "I've known Elena for 12 years. She's mentioned her family only a handful of times, and each time it was to explain why she'd be alone for Christmas or Thanksgiving, in his office, at work." "That's not fair," my father exploded, but his protest sounded pathetic and false. "Not fair?" Patricia pulled out her phone with a cold smile. "Elena, can I?" I nodded, my heart pounding in my throat. She turned the screen toward Robert. "Read this, Robert. The message her sister sent her on Tuesday." Robert took the phone. His eyes scanned the lines, and I saw his jaw tense, his complacent expression shattered by a stone wave of anger. He read aloud, slowly, separating the words. "Don't come to the rehearsal dinner. Jason's father is a federal judge. We can't allow you to embarrass us." "That's taken out of context," Claire shrieked, her fingers digging into the white tablecloth. "Really?" I spoke this time, calmly. I pulled out my phone. I opened that very folder, my personal archive of pain, and began reading, my voice never wavering. "Here's a text from my law school graduation. Can't make it. Claire has an interview at a boutique that day. Good luck. Here's one from my appointment as a judge. That's sweet. Claire's getting a promotion today. We're going to dinner." And here's one in response to my first publication in a law journal. Silence. Jason finally collapsed into his chair, as if his legs had given out. He looked at Claire, and the trust in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by a cold, frightening insight. How could I not know any of this?" "Because I didn't tell you," Claire whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks, washing away her perfect makeup. "I just said we're not very close." "You said your sister is a failure who never achieved anything in life," Jason said crisply. His words fell into the silence with the weight of a gravestone. Robert Harrison, a federal judge with 40 years of experience, a man who had dedicated his life to finding truth in a web of lies and half-truths, glanced at my parents, then at Claire. His face was an impenetrable mask, but a storm raged in his eyes. "I think," he said with icy restraint, "we all need to figure out what the hell is really going on here." And the interrogation began. Not a shouting match, not a fight, a merciless, methodical interrogation conducted by a master of his craft. "Claire, when was the last time you talked to your sister about anything other than the weather or your plans?" We talked." "About what, specifically?" "About family, about life." "Did you ask her about her work, about her career, about what she lives for?" Claire was silent, her lips trembling. "She doesn't like to talk about work," she breathed weakly. And I couldn't resist. A short, dry, joyless laugh escaped me. "That's a lie. You haven't asked me about work once in 15 years. Not once." Robert shifted his heavy gaze to my parents. "Virginia, Frank, when was the last time you were at your daughter's house, visited her, attended events important to her?" My mother looked down, her fingers fiddling with her napkin. "Elena, she's very independent. She doesn't like it when we interfere in her life." What a convenient interpretation, Patricia retorted, her voice ringing with anger. I was there when Elena received the Lawyer of the Year award in the district. I heard her praised by the presiding judges, her legal opinions cited. She is the youngest federal judge appointed in this district in 2 decades. And you're telling me that none of these accomplishments deserved your attention? My father's face flushed with a mixture of shame and anger. She never invited us. She did, I interrupted, my voice finally regaining the same strength I bring to the podium. I invited you to my graduation, my swearing-in ceremony, my first serious hearings as a judge. You were always very busy. You always had something more important to do. Claire was crying silently now, her shoulders shaking. Tears left dark streaks down her cheeks. I didn't know that it was like this. You never bragged. I didn't brag. I talked. You didn't listen. That's the difference. Jason suddenly stood up abruptly and walked over to the huge window, turning away from everyone. He stood staring into the darkness of the garden, his back a tense, straight silhouette. Robert watched him for a second, then turned back to my family, his tone no longer laced with anger, but with a profound, almost physical revulsion. Let's recap. You have a daughter who carved out her own path, paid for her education, built a brilliant career defending the most vulnerable, achieved the highest recognition in our profession. And your reaction is to ignore her, to belittle her, to erase her from family events for fear that she will disgrace you? We didn't erase her, my father tried to snap back. In response, I picked up the phone again and began reading. In a monotone, like a court clerk reading an indictment. Message from November 4th. Thanksgiving this year at Claire's new apartment, very intimate, just us and Jason's parents. Maybe you should spend it differently? I spent it differently, in an empty office with a file folder and cold coffee. Under the table, Patricia's hand covered mine. Her palm was warm and firm. But the most astonishing fact, Robert's voice dropped to a deadly whisper, is that you wrote to her this week and told her not to come here because you were afraid she would embarrass you in front of me, a federal judge. He shook his head slowly with incredible contempt. In 40 years on the bench, I've seen all sorts of things, but this kind of deliberate cruelty towards your own child, that's exceptional. Jason returned to the table, but he didn't sit next to Claire. He sank into the empty chair next to me. He looked at me with a direct, honest gaze, full of agonizing shame. Judge Rivera, Elena, I need to apologize to you. You have nothing to apologize for, Jason, I said. You've become a hostage to someone else's lies. I believed that lie. I didn't question it. I didn't double-check. It's my fault, he said firmly, taking responsibility like a true man. Then his gaze shifted to Claire, and there was nothing left in his eyes but icy disappointment. We need to have a serious talk, without witnesses. Jason, please. Claire's voice was resigned, broken. Later, Claire, he snapped, and those 2 words sealed everything she'd so desperately tried to play at. Jason's voice broke the silence again, heavy and ringing, but now it sounded different, not like an accusation, but like a statement of fact, mingled with echoes of professional admiration. I read your opinion in Martinez versus County of Los Angeles, he said, looking directly at me. Unqualified immunity for police. It was the most detailed, most uncompromising analysis of the Fourth Amendment defense I've ever seen. I used it last year in a civil rights case. And how did it end, I asked, though I could already guess from his tone. We won. My client received compensation. Justice has been served. He paused, and something flashed in his eyes, respect bordering on amazement, thanks in large part to your arguments. Robert Harrison nodded in agreement, like a professor confirming a student's brilliant answer. Elena's opinion in Martinez has already been cited in 17 cases across 4 circuits. It's becoming precedent-setting. She's not just applying the law, she's changing it. My mother made a quiet, strangled sound, as if the wind had been knocked out of her. Her gaze darted between Robert and me, trying to grasp the scope of what he was talking about. 17 cases, I corrected quietly but clearly. 18. The Second Circuit cited it last week. And then it finally hit them with all its irreversible granite weight. Not just the fact that I was successful, but the fact that I was influential, respected. My name and my decisions carried weight in the very world whose representatives they had been so desperately trying to curry favor with all these months. And how much does a federal judge make? Father croaked out of habit from the depths of his worldview. Of course, that's what he asked. $233,000 a year, I stated crisply, plus a full benefits package, a lifetime appointment. I saw his face lose its last color, and I moved on, relentlessly, laying out the facts before them like evidence on a prosecutor's desk. I also own a home, a 3-bedroom cottage in Pasadena, the mortgage on which was fully paid off last year. My retirement portfolio is valued at approximately $1,200,000. I drive a fully paid-off Tesla Model S. I have no debt. None. I paused briefly, icily. But thank you for asking about my financial stability. It only took 38 years. Claire began to sob, no longer quietly, but loudly, convulsively, choking. Her body convulsed with spasms. Jason silently handed her a paper napkin across the table. He didn't touch it. He didn't console her. He simply handed it to her. It was more terrifying than any scream. Patricia had remained silent the entire time, watching, absorbing. Her sharp, judicial gaze captured every tremor, every glance. And now, as the atmosphere reached boiling point, she leaned forward, folding her hands on the table. I want to tell you something about your daughter, she began, her voice resonating with an inexorable, pedagogical precision. What you should have known, but apparently you didn't know and didn't want to know. Her mother looked at her like a mouse at a boa constrictor. Her father simply sat, broken, devastated. When Elena worked for me as a secretary, I squeezed every last drop of juice out of her, 80 hours a week. Appellate cases are hell. Most people burn out within a year. She thrived. She saw connections others missed. She found precedents that turned cases around. She drafted opinions that I sometimes used verbatim in my final versions. Patricia turned to me, and her eyes shone with that unconditional, proud tenderness I'd come to expect from my own mother. After she left me, I recommended her to every judge who would listen, and when a vacancy opened, I personally called 5 senators. Because she wasn't just good, she was phenomenal. I didn't know you did that, I whispered, a lump forming in my throat. Because you don't seek praise, you just get the job done, she said softly, then turned her icy gaze back on my parents. And it's this woman you've ignored for years. It was to her you told her not to come, afraid she would embarrass you. Robert Harrison rose. His movements were slow, dignified. I think we all need a break. Jason, Elena, Patricia, would you join me in the garden? I need some air. We stood. We rose at the same time, as a united front. I didn't look back, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw Claire, sobbing, clutching her mother's sleeve. What are we going to do now? Her whisper was full of animal terror. And I heard my mother's muffled, helpless reply, I don't know. The Rosewood Manor garden was an oasis of artificial, purchased beauty. Stone slabs, trimmed shrubs, the heavy, intoxicating scent of night-blooming jasmine. Robert took out a cigar, leisurely trimmed it, and lit it. He offered it to Jason, who silently declined. The smoke curled in ghostly rings in the cool air. I'm truly sorry, Elena, Robert said, staring into the darkness. I had no idea. If I had known... Would you have done what? I asked softly. Told your son not to marry? No, but I would have insisted that you be treated with due respect in this family. I would have made sure Jason knew who he was dealing with. Jason paced nervously up and down the path, his hands in his pockets. I feel like a complete idiot. You're not an idiot, I said. You trusted your fiancé. That's normal. But I'm a lawyer. My job is to question, to fact-check, to evaluate the credibility of sources. He stopped abruptly, turning to me. And instead, I simply accepted that her sister was a worthless loser. To be fair, my own family has been hammering that same message into me for years, I said with a bitter smile. Patricia, leaning against a column, studied my face carefully. What are you feeling now? Tell me honestly. I closed my eyes for a second, listening to myself. Excuse. A bitter, cold excuse. But also, immense sadness. Sadness that everything could have been different, if only they'd just been a little interested. We could have had a normal relationship. They could have been truly proud. I looked at the illuminated windows of the banquet hall, but they're incapable of that. There was simply no room for me in their worldview. Robert took a drag on his cigarette and blew out a stream of smoke. And what do you want now? What do you expect from this evening? In what sense? I'm the host of this party. I can end it. Politely ask them to leave. I have that right. He looked at me, his gaze clear, his readiness to carry out any decision I made. Power. It was in my hands now. Absolute. I could end this evening with complete and resounding triumph, humiliating them the way they deserved. But when I imagined it, no glee flared inside, only emptiness. No, I breathed out. Let the dinner continue, but I will not sit at their table. Robert nodded approvingly. Accepted. You will sit with Patricia and me. We will have our own conversation. Let them see what it looks like to appreciate you. Jason came closer. His gaze held a genuine, painful sincerity. Can I ask you a personal question? Go ahead. Did you know who I was when we met at the door? No, Patricia only told me on Wednesday. We've never crossed paths. But you came here anyway. Patricia invited me, and yes, I wanted to see Claire's face when she realized, I admitted frankly. The corners of his lips twitched, briefly curving into something resembling a smile. And was it worth it? Absolutely, I replied, my voice a little light for the first time that evening. He nodded, as if mentally checking a box. Then his face grew serious again. If that means anything, I'm breaking off the engagement. I leaned back in the iron garden chair, feeling the world beneath me sway slightly. Because of tonight. Because tonight exposed you, he corrected firmly. Claire didn't just ignore you. She's built her entire personality on contrasting with you, on belittling you. She's not the woman I want to spend my life with. He paused, collecting his thoughts. My father was right. Marriage is forever. I need a man who values people, not their status. I'm sorry. Don't. You might have saved yourself from a huge mistake, I said quietly. He nodded, already turning to leave, but paused at the threshold. I'd like to stay in touch, if you don't mind, of course. As colleagues, I'd be only too happy to, I replied, and it was the truth. He left. And a few days later, when the dust had settled a bit, Patricia called. Her voice on the phone sounded satisfied. The news has reached me. Jason has officially called off the engagement. Rumors fly fast. Robert told me over breakfast. Claire, he said, called him in tears, begging him to influence her son. And what did he say? That his son is an adult who makes his own decisions, and that Claire herself had perfectly shown him who she really is. I leaned back in my judge's chair, and my gaze fell on the framed photograph on the table. It was Patricia and I on the day of my swearing in. We were both smiling. It was a picture of family, a real family. And how do you feel now? Patricia asked, just as she had in the garden. I glanced around my office, my world, the one I had built myself. Free, I replied, and there was no malice or bitterness in the word, only the calm, pure truth. Absolutely free. 3 weeks after that evening, Claire showed up at the courthouse. Security called me. The duty officer's voice was respectful, but slightly hesitant. Judge Rivera, you have a visitor. Claire Rivera introduced herself and said, she's your sister. She wants to see her. Send her back, I replied, not looking up from the screen. She insists, says the case is extremely important. I close my eyes. 10 minutes, exactly 10. Conference room B for 10 minutes. Claire looked shattered. Without her usual makeup, wearing worn jeans and a simple sweatshirt, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. She seemed smaller, shrunken, as if her inner frame of pretense and ambition had finally collapsed. "Thank you for seeing me," she began, her voice wavering. "You have 10 minutes, I reminded him coldly, not offering him a seat. Jason isn't answering his calls. His dad refuses to intervene. Mom and Dad are in a complete panic. Everything is falling apart, and I want you to help fix it." "What exactly do you want me to do?" "I want you to talk to him, to tell him I'm sorry, that things can be different." I leaned back in the leather chair, crossing my arms over my chest. "This can't be fixed, Claire. Jason made a decision based on who you showed yourself to be. No words will change anything now." "But you can talk to him. Tell him that I've changed." "Have you changed?" I asked bluntly, looking her in the eyes. She blinked, confused. "What? Have you really changed? Or are you just desperate because you lost what you wanted so much?" The silence in the room grew thick, almost palpable. She simply stared at me, her eyes unresponsive, only panic and confusion. "That's what I thought," I said quietly, standing up. "Claire, I'm going to tell you one thing, and I want you to finally hear it. You spent 38 years treating me like a second-class citizen. You convinced yourself I was a failure so you could feel important. And when the truth came out, when you saw that I was everything you'd only pretended to be, your first instinct wasn't to apologize. It was to figure out how to use my connections to solve your problems. You didn't come here because you were sorry. You came because you wanted something from me." Her face contorted with pain, not remorse, with the realization that the manipulation hadn't worked. "I don't know how to be different," she breathed out, almost in a whisper. "Then sort it out, but do it away from me." I pressed the button to call security and asked to see the visitor out. She left without turning around, her shoulders hunched under the weightless weight of her own failure. That was the last time I saw her face to face. 6 months later, a letter arrived from my mother. Subject, "Can we talk?" I moved it to the trash bin without opening it. A month later, my father mailed a paper letter directly to my office. Marcus, my secretary, brought it with a silent question in his eyes. "Family matters," I explained briefly. The envelope was heavy. 3 pages of flowery apologies, justifications, pleas for one more chance. I emotionlessly filed it away in the archives without deigning a reply. And 3 months later, a wedding invitation arrived from Claire, not from Jason. She apparently moved on, some Brad from the financial sector. I left the envelope unopened. Patricia asked me about it at our traditional lunch. "Do you ever regret cutting ties?" "No," I answered firmly. "They had 38 years to be my family. They made their choice. I don't have to give them a 39th chance." "And what about Jason?" "Jason made the only right decision. He deserves better than Claire. He's dating a colleague from his firm, a civil rights lawyer. He seems happy." "I'm happy for him." Patricia stared at me as if searching for a flaw. "You're really okay with all this?" "Yes, because I realized one important thing. Family isn't biology. It's choice. You chose me. Robert chose me. My colleagues, my secretary, the lawyers I work with, they choose me every day. That's enough." "More than enough," Patricia said quietly, her eyes shining with deep understanding. "That's all." 2 years had passed since that rehearsal dinner that changed everything. I was nominated to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Patricia called me, screaming so loudly I almost dropped the phone. "You're moving to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. If they confirm you," I tried to remain calm, though my heart was pounding. "They confirm you. Robert and I will make sure of it, even if we have to personally visit every senator." The confirmation process took 8 long months. Hearings, reviews, endless questions. Robert Harrison testified on my behalf. Patricia did the same. And Jason Montgomery, who over these 2 years has become not just a colleague, but a true friend. Judge Rivera embodies the best of our judicial system, Robert said, addressing the Senate committee. She is fair, impartial, and brilliant, and she understands that justice is not just the letter of the law, it is humanity. I was confirmed by a vote of 92-8. At 40, I became one of the youngest judges in the history of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The swearing-in ceremony took place in a packed courtroom. Colleagues, attorneys, former clients, students. Patricia stood next to me, her hand firmly on my shoulder. Robert Harrison administered the oath. And then, in the back of the room, I saw her. Claire. She'd somehow found out about the ceremony and come. After I'd said my vows, after the applause had died down, she approached. "Congratulations," she said simply. Her voice was quiet, without its former ostentatious brightness. "Thank you. I'm proud of you." I looked at my sister. For the first time in years, I truly looked. I saw in her eyes the girl I'd once shared a room with, the person whose love and acceptance I'd so desperately awaited. And I realized that that girl was somewhere far in the past. "I appreciate your words," I replied softly, but without hesitation, "but it doesn't change anything." "I know," she whispered. "I just wanted you to hear it." She turned and walked away. I watched her figure disappear into the crowd. Patricia was there again, like a guardian, like a custodian angel. "Is everything all right?" "Absolutely," I replied, and it was the honest truth. She came, but it doesn't matter anymore. And it really didn't matter. Because I was surrounded by the people who had chosen me, who rejoiced at my every success, who believed in me when I was just a clerk, then a defense attorney, then a judge. They were my world. That evening, Robert hosted a dinner, an intimate one, for just the closest people. Jason was there with his Sarah, a smart, witty woman who had already won 2 brilliant cases in my court. Marcus, whose devotion knew no bounds. Fellow judges with whom we had been through thick and thin. We raised toasts, reminisced about funny cases from our legal practice, and laughed until we cried. At the end of the evening, Robert raised his glass again. A silence fell over the room. "To Elena Rivera," he said, his voice, accustomed to speaking from the heights of a judge's chair, now warm and heartfelt. "To the person who proved that family isn't just blood, but those who come, believe, and stay." "To Elena," the others chorused. I glanced around the table. I saw faces, intelligent, kind, shining with genuine joy. This was my family, the real deal. And that was enough. That was everything. And my sister, sitting somewhere alone, finally realizing what she'd lost forever, would never understand the most important thing. The moment she feared most, the moment she tried to prevent by rescinding my invitation to her rehearsal dinner, became not a defeat for me, but a liberation. It gave me the freedom to find the family I deserved. The freedom to build the life I built myself, brick by brick. The freedom to finally become who I was always meant to be, a federal judge, a mentor, a friend. Someone who matters, not because I was finally recognized by the one whose recognition I once craved, but because I created a world where recognition comes from those whose opinions actually matter. And in that world, I was enough, more than enough.